Dr. Courtney Worley, and I'm a clinical psychologist who is board certified in clinical psychology. I'm here today to talk about board certification and common questions that I hear from people who are thinking about pursuing board certification. So, let me tell you a little bit about why I chose to pursue board certification with the American Board of Professional Psychology. So there are really three reasons. The first being when I was on internship, my director of training was going through the process, pursuing board certification in clinical health psychology. And watching her go through the process and learning from her what it looked like and what her reasons for doing so were really gave me some encouragement and a greater sense of self efficacy that this is something I could pursue and should pursue, how it would align with my goals. After completing internship, I moved on to work in a medical center. And being in the medical center, board certification was a quick and easy way to communicate to my interdisciplinary colleagues my qualifications. It was a language that made sense, and there was an incentive within my medical center to pursue board certification. And so it provided some career advancement. And then the final reason that I went through and chose to pursue board certification was really a personal goal. I set up this expectation for myself that I could be board certified, and going through this process and learning more about my own self reflective practice, really spending some time looking at the reasons why I practice in an evidence based way and how I use that evidence to inform clinical decision making, supervision decisions, consultation decisions was really an added benefit. So there were personal and professional benefits for me in pursuing board certification. One of the questions that often comes up, and it was a question I had early on, is which board? How do I know where I should go? There are a lot of different options. And given that my experience was in clinical health psychology, geropsychology, and then once I started in practice, I did a lot of work in trauma and sleep, there were a lot of options open to me. And so, what I did, and what I would encourage anyone having this question to do, is I started talking to people. I started talking to people who had board certifications under the different areas of specialty. And I started looking when I heard someone speak or when I read an article, what was their board certification and how did that match up with my long term goals? And so I ultimately decided to pursue clinical psychology because I felt like it cast the broadest net for me at the time. I could highlight my experiences in trauma as well as my integration of gero and health across the specialty. And it's really been a good fit for me these last roughly 10 years. The next question I get frequently is how much time is this going to take? Most of us as clinical psychologists are busy juggling a lot of roles and responsibilities professionally and personally. And so, is it going to be worth the time investment? Now, I pursued board certification about 10, 11 years ago, and so there were some differences. For example, I had to wait on transcripts to be mailed by postal service. And so there were some things like that that probably added time that wouldn't be in the process now. But the biggest chunk of my time was really spent writing and recording the materials for my practice sample submission. And so this took me about 3 months where I would write and refine and reflect and research. So lots of R's. And then I would also spend time on videos and recording my practice samples. I did several iterations. And part of that was to make sure that I was adequately sharing my experience and my um, talents, but the other part of that was about habituation. Some to me, but luckily or unluckily, as clinical psychologists, we've had a lot of videotape review, so we've probably habituated to that through training. But for the other people in the video, my patient kind of needed a couple of sessions to forget that camera was over there and engage in a different way. I also found that in recording consultation sessions or supervision sessions, I tried a couple of different versions to see what I wanted to use and for my consultee or supervisee to habituate. So, giving yourself time for those things is pretty important. Then, moving through to preparations for the oral exam. And for my oral exam, I did have to travel. So coordinating that was a little bit of an additional time. But it took me about a year from start to finish. Certainly, some people may take longer or shorter frames than that, but I think that's pretty average considering other people that I've spoken with. Last thing I want to talk about today is the benefit. I've talked about it a little bit already, but it's one of the key questions is how is this going to benefit me? And so I think professionally, it helps us with our career advancement, depending on where you work. There can be some financial incentives for attaining board certification, but it also has opened doors for me where people were specifically looking for board certification, or they told me that my board certification kind of edged me out in qualifications compared to other people that were up for a particular position. And so I think it's an important piece. I've also received some contracts that specifically were looking for people who are board certified. And then I also just mentioned the personal benefit. It really taught me a deeper dive in terms of reflection in my self reflective practice. So there's been a lot of benefit. And so I really want to say thank you today to the American Board of Professional Psychology for creating these resources and continuing to offer support to board certified psychologists. And I wish you all the best in your journey. Thank you.